Hello all, and before I get started on these lectures on Heidegger, I wanted to announce that I have recovered the old channel, so I have been re-uploading videos on YouTube at a day pace, I would say. I don't want to muddy up everyone's feeds with a bunch of my lectures that I already posted on the alternative channel. But today, since I hadn't posted in almost a month on the BitChute channel, I figured I would give the BitChute audience, my far bigger audience actually, a little special Heidegger lecture here before it goes to YouTube, probably next week. And so I wanted to look at Heidegger improper now. I do not know if I will be able to offer up everything within Heidegger's philosophy, of course. In this one lecture, I might have to do one on being and time itself, which would be fun to do, obviously. Heidegger is very influential on my own works that I've done on the channel, so of course I'm interested in sharing his insights. And so if we're going to get right into it, I figured we would start with his critiques of his mentor with Husserl and the phenomenological method. Heidegger is going to rather explicitly reject the notion, or at least be skeptical of a new foundationalism to come out of this method, simply because the existential phenomenology of bracketing really can never be completed, at least for Heidegger. You can't strip away that sort of transcendental self from this or that or the other in some sort of way of looking at objects. We can't, purely look at it in this sort of way. When we looked at the subject and object relationship with Husserl, there's the hyphen, in between that was really missing with Descartes, for example, or foundational philosophy and metaphysics prior. Heidegger's trying to say that, it's thinking about abstract ideas. You can't really bracket that off. You can't have the hyphen without the objects, or in its bareness, abstract thinking always requires, particulars that will become then symbolic through our language, and they hold a greater significance, even though they started off as, particulars or a point of reference. This is how you make meaningful symbolic language possible. And so, if we were going to use that critique to really be the jumping point for Heidegger's philosophy here, we can look at some of his terms that he uses in his own philosophy, starting with existentialia, very tough to say, which is basically the categories of objects from the existential qualities of human subjectivity. And so he's trying to ask, what are the universal characteristics of being in the world? And he really says that, the hyphen isn't a knowing relationship. Our theories about the world, whether it's biological, psychological, certainly with Nietzsche, and other philosophers, going all the way back to the Greeks, as he does. This isn't a knowing relationship about these theories, because we're already a being in the world. We already come into this world, prior to any sort of empirical theories to come. And so he's, really trying to say that, Nietzsche and some of these other existentialists are really just doing an elucidation of existence. So for Heidegger, philosophy was interested in the ground of all being, Sein, as he would say, and being itself as a distinction, where being in the world is, with Dasein, is a description of our being in the world. And so one of his early essays, Heidegger has, there's of course Being in Time, which is his most famous work, of course. But he also has a collection of essays that run from the 20s to I think the 50s with the Turning. But his metaphysics essay, I think, is actually really helpful to use as a way of introducing perhaps being in time itself, which in his metaphysics essay, he's trying to ask, why is there something rather than nothing? And he's really trying to capture the sort of existential moment of this. What is, that's sort of the qualities of being in the world, and asking, why is there something rather than nothing? But of course, as we turn to Being in Time in 1927 prior, Sein and Zeit, he's looking at the sort of temporal aspect. You'll remember, of course, in the Kantian tradition, how temporality and time, as it were, really, gives way for the categories of our perceptions. And so that temporal aspect is certainly going to, the temporality of our being in this world will stir the sort of existential qualities of conscious existence. Time may be our structure of being in the world, but how would we understand being itself? And so Heidegger wants to, ask for a more direct approach to being. And you'll see, of course, as I'm going along on this video here, these sort of terms, there's really no other way for Heidegger to really go about this language. In fact, in Being in Time, and what I think is the driest part of the text, personally, I know that a lot of Heideggerian scholars will also say this, that the intro to Being in Time is actually extremely difficult. It was written after Being in Time, and so there's a lot of terminology here that can be very, very difficult to decipher. But in his own intro, he's trying to say that there's no other way for this to be written, really. He definitely is self-aware of this kind of stuff. So I think there is, it's very necessary to, try to approach these ideas with the understanding that it'll probably take you, more than one time to really get at it. Because, something like being in the world simultaneously can manage to, represent, everything around us. But if it represents everything around us, then you are actually talking about nothing in that sort of sense. Everything can't be nothing, especially with language. We set out to describe objects or things like that. So, something like being in the world, as it were, it's very difficult to actually go about with language, and that's something that Heidegger is also going to be interested in with things like logic and what, that there is a shortfall to that sort of thing. So I think also we can turn to his etymology of truth. He does a lot of interesting etymologies with the Greeks, especially with his essay on truth. So he takes the Greek word aletheia, which is sort of the rock or the stones that roll away from us and reveal ourselves. Truth is the nature of something or the being that appears to us. And so what he's really trying to get at is, as we posit questions or examine qualities of objects or concepts, whatever the case may be, there is that sort of implicitness within that, things with that object, as we make those assumptions, are going to fall to the wayside as other things are going to be revealed to us. And so he's trying to, tell us that, truth is the nature of something that appears to us. And so it's interesting to look at, his use of the word I, for example, is taking that universal dimension of how Hegel did in his logic. There's the universal dimension of the hyphen, the I-ness, is of course not just in the individual, but it comes from the universal concepts or universal ideas that are then brought into us through particulars, and I as a sort of subject is a synthesis between universal ideals and what I particularly am. And so being, he wants to ask if being can reveal itself in our being in the world, or the being of beings, and the I as the concrete of the universal through our particulars of you. So I know that was a lot there to really unravel, but perhaps some of these famous terms that I can represent here to try to flesh out some of Heidegger's ideas in being and time. So if we turn to facticity for Heidegger is really just the descriptions of bare facts of just objects in the world, whereas Vorhandenheit is the status of, or the instrumental or tool used by others to be on hand, whereas existentiality is the possibilities adherent to human existence, or the freedom to be something. And then if you turn to forfeiture or fallenness, is the experience of that forfeit of possibilities involved in consciousness. Another thing that's really interesting, perhaps, if you're new to Heidegger's writings, is when he talks about what is inauthentic and what is authenticity. He doesn't really mean it in that sort of way we typically see something like the word authenticity, where authenticity kind of has that assumption that that is there's a sort of morality to it. You want to be authentic and not inauthentic. For Heidegger, that's not necessarily the case here. He's saying that we go towards authenticity and then retract back to something more inauthentic. Especially when he goes on, trying to describe or have a philosophy of, trying to get at being in everydayness, which is very influential to me, of course, with how, I had concerns, or have concerns, of course, with, you look at, complex metaphysics or the pursuit of knowledge, and how, yes, this could, help maybe people who would truly, get it, as it were. But you're kind of in that kind of Descartes notion of being by yourself in this stove-heated room when there's an entire world going on around you. Having the truth all to yourself where it can't really be tapped into to someone who's going about in their average everyday life. And that's certainly a concern with Heidegger and his philosophy. Being onto death, though, is the intentionality of all consciousness, that our own existence of being onto death. He's trying to pick at, the sort of existential qualities. Of course, you're guaranteed that your being in the world is temporary. And so Dasein, or being with or togetherness, is consciousness related to others. And so if we're going to turn then to something like the subject and object relationship, it's the sort of making of your own image, making it an object for me as I project my meaning onto the world around me. There's, of course, that postmodern influence here that Heidegger is going to be known for as, this sort of ancestor to, a direct descendant, really, toward people like Sartre and the other French philosophers that are to follow him, certainly in the 70s and 80s. So you have the knowing or use of language are seen really as modes of being in the world. Naming, and that the use of language gives meaning to the things that you want it to have. And so there's that potential of that will and the naming aspect that actually reveals more about yourself and how you feel about it in your perceptions than what entails the actual object itself. And so the quest for truth, really, if we're going to turn to his epistemology here, is really the quest for truth, or to uncover being, or to have those stones, pushed away in that sort of being that shows, in your sort of moment of truth, what your actual being is. There's the phrase, when the moment of truth, when, there's the pedal to the metal, if you will, of, when you're reacting to something in a volatile situation, are you not, are those stones not going away? And are you, having your being revealed to yourself in that sort of sense? I think that that saying, the moment of truth, and that sort of directness is very helpful to always consider when looking at Heidegger's philosophy and what he's trying to do. He's, really trying to pick at, truth, in that sort of quest of the being that shows itself in your existence. And that's how you get towards, understanding your being in the world, quite literally. And so I think this is just a soft introduction, if you will. It's only about 20 minutes here of some of Heidegger's terminology, how he delineates himself from his mentor Husserl, and I think this is a very, very quick but attempted concise video of Heidegger's philosophy. It's, of course, very complicated, very tough to pick at often. And I think, it has to do with, what he's actually, trying to get at, which is, of course, being in the world. And, you're going to have to use these sort of terminology to really express that. But, of course, for Heidegger, within his philosophy and his ideas, you see that, there is a shortfall here. And, it's interesting to look at how, philosophy after Nietzsche and his sort of creative writings, logical syllogism falls to really the wayside for, that expression beyond just, our rational, we're not just, rational animals for someone like Aristotle, but, looking beyond that, looking at, existentialist notions and concerns that can't, be expressed perhaps just through present at hand objectivity, or the turning towards something like arts as opposed to science, which is of course a big theme with how Nietzsche looks at someone like Socrates or the Greeks in general. And so I think that's always interesting to perhaps consider with what Heidegger's trying to do with regards to seeing that all of these sort of theories or disciplines that are arising in his time, which dominate today's world. I also wanted to perhaps part a little story of my own, perhaps with Heidegger's philosophy. I've shared this before to some of you, but when I was younger, I was into political science, and that certainly was what I was listing as my major, 10 or so years ago now. But it was actually Heidegger's arguments of looking at the symptoms of disease, and seeing that the political science that we talk of today, I don't think that necessarily that this won't be true for political science forever. I do, I am hopeful that it can be redeemed, but most of political science at this point is really just treating, symptoms of a greater disease, of a greater existential dread or anxiety. Things like raising the GDP, or economic concerns and whatnot. I definitely don't believe that is that's just a short-term answer. This is like giving someone with cancer in the throat or something, cough syrup to deal with their cough or something like that, or high blood pressure. You take an ibuprofen to deal with your lightheadedness or your headache or something like that, when in reality you have high blood pressure and you need to deal with that. Political science now, or really these disciplines in general, very much come off through Heidegger's philosophy that it isn't sufficient enough to actually answer the question of being, or dealing with being thrown in the world, as he would describe, and those sort of questions. There really is a lack of concern for that, and of course that's what Heidegger's point is with all of these systems and notions about the world with regards to the sciences and whatnot, that they have these preconceived notions. An academic goes into some sort of scientific experiment with preconceived notions that will tell or act upon how truth will be revealed to him. This is a I guess now 25-minute introduction to Heidegger's philosophy on the channel. I will probably do more than one of these to really get at all of the technical aspects of being and time, and I hope you guys join me for it and enjoy this. Like I said, I wanted to give the BitChute audience something to hang on to in the meantime. And make sure to subscribe to the old YouTube channel as I've recovered it. It would mean a lot to me, of course. Of course, as usual, comment, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you guys for the next discussion on Heidegger. I hope you enjoyed.